Whitacre, our next speaker, has been instrumental in helping us figure out how to navigate our own journey. Because Mark serves as the Vice President of Culture and Care and the Executive Director of T Factor Initiative within Coca-Cola Consolidated. He served as an executive in Fortune 500 companies, has his undergrad and master's in The Ohio State University, and a PhD at Cornell. Oh, we got some Buckeye fans in here. Okay. And so he is a wealth of knowledge from an educational standpoint, but decades of experience of bringing this to life to transform people and organizations. But to Davin's point, it hasn't always been sunshine and roses. He has a pretty powerful story because Mark is still the highest ranked executive that has served as a whistleblower. He wore a wire for 3 years for the FBI to help root out ADM's price fixing scandal. And from that experience has shifted and catalyzed his own life, the lives of others, and the lives of organizations. So please welcome to the stage, Mark Whitacre.
I tell you, it's so great to be here at the Purpose Summit, and we're honored to be able to share here and to be a part of the event and to sponsor the event. What a great audience I've had a chance to meet since yesterday. A lot of you personally, and I hope over the next day and a half I get to meet all of you, I hope. So thank you for coming, and thank you for being part of this wonderful annual conference they have here, and we look forward to being part of it next year also. So as Ron was sharing, he said, have you ever had this moment? Remember, he had that first slide up, and he said, have you ever had that moment, why did I do that? Well, I've had a moment, why did I do that? And it was about 34 years ago, and I'm going to share a personal journey. Then I'm going to share after that how we integrate faith at Coca-Cola Consolidated. But I'm going to start with a personal testimony that started when I was 32 years old. I'm 66 years old now. So this is 34 years ago, and it's definitely one of those moments, why did I do that? Definitely one of those moments where he talked about how you can lie to yourself and rationalize, well, it's not that bad. It's really not that bad. Everybody's doing it, and that's where I was in the early 1990s. Did not believe in God at that time, was not a Christian at that time of my life, and this is probably an example, what I'm going to share, of selfish leadership, not servant leadership. And it's probably an example of chasing the wrong things, not the right things. And also an example of striving for a life of success instead of a life of significance. And that's the journey I'm going to share here this morning. Well, when I was 32 years old, I was divisional president of one of the largest companies in the world, known as ADM, Archer Daniels Midland, $70 billion in revenue, 32,000 employees, headquartered in Decatur, Illinois. I was in West Germany. I got as Amber said, I got my PhD in biochemistry from Cornell and Ohio State University. I saw a few Ohio State fans there. And when I was in Germany, I was vice president responsible for joint ventures, acquisitions, and I was in my 20s. When I finished Cornell at 25, within a few years, I was living in Germany for almost 5 years, responsible for acquisitions and joint ventures of a company. And I was doing joint ventures with ADM, the CEO of ADM. He was 75 years old, and I was 32 years old at the time that he hired me. And I can remember he said, Mark, he said, you got a lot of bureaucracy at Degussa. And Degussa was about a $30 billion company itself. And like I said, ADM was number 56 on the Fortune 500 and was $70 billion in annual revenue. And he said, why don't you just join us? You got a lot of bureaucracy here in Germany. And I said, I'm 2 years in New York, 4.5 years in Germany. There's no way I'm going to leave this company. And this is something I want to share with you that I think will come out clearly in what I'm going to share. Show me your mentors, and I show you your future. I had good mentors at this company in Germany. I was on a right track in my life. And then he said, well, how much do you earn? And I told him how much I earned. It was Deutschmarks in Germany, even before euros existed. I lived there when the wall came down between East Germany and West Germany. I lived there during that time in 1989. So I told him in U.S. dollars what it was, and he said, well, what that? And I said, that's the stock options, base salary, full compensation. He said, well, I'll give you 10 times that. I'll give you your full compensation as your base salary, but with bonuses and stock options, that'll be 10 times that. And I just spent an hour telling him that I've been here 6 years. There's no way I'm leaving. And I said, where do I sign? I mean, I was caught up in the world. All I heard when I was at Cornell University during my PhD years in biochemistry, that God did not exist. I went 8 years for bachelor's, master's, and PhD, had not met one Christian professor in 8 years. But I had plenty of professors at Cornell said that if you believe in God, you cannot be a PhD scientist. I had one say, if you believe in God, you can't be in my class. So you hear that for 8 years. I started telling all my friends that my parents are Christians because they didn't go to college. They don't know better. That's what I told all my friends during the time at Cornell. And by the way, my wife's going to come in this story a little bit in a minute. I'm going to share a little bit about her. We met in 7th and 8th grade. My wife and I went to our high school proms together. Her name's Ginger, and she's a big part of this story, so I kind of needed to share when I met her. And she also didn't believe in God because she worked for Carl Sagan in astrophysics. When I was getting my PhD in biochemistry, I don't know if you remember Carl Sagan, the show Cosmos, but that's who she worked for in astrophysics during this time when I was getting my PhD at Cornell. So she didn't believe in God during that time either, during her college years. But she did become a Christian at age 30, and I was not there. I even tried to tell her, I said, Ginger, you can't believe in God. I'm a PhD scientist from an Ivy League school. God does not exist. She said, Mark, I can tell you, you're wrong. God exists. Jesus is the Son of God, and you can take that PhD and shove it. And boy, she met her. Her mom was 10 months in the hospital, almost died. Ginger sat by her side, and both her mom and Ginger became Christians during that journey many years ago. So now I'm at this company called ADM. I remember when I came home and told Ginger in Germany, in Frankfurt, I said, Ginger, we're moving to Decatur, Illinois. I just joined another company. She said, you didn't do it for the money, did you? I said, Ginger, they're going to pay me 10 times more. With bonuses and stock options, we're going to be in the 7 figures, 10 times more. They're the largest producer in the world of ethanol. I said, they have the largest food additive company in the world. You can't buy an iced tea or a beverage or a Tyson chicken. It's difficult to buy a Pillsbury, a Kraft without something from ADM in it. Largest food additive company in the world. She said, well, as long as you didn't do it for the money. And boy, I was doing it for the money. I can tell you, almost tenfold. So I'm 32. I get to Decatur, Illinois. It was October of '89. And the CEO came back to my office. It was the first week working there. And he said, Mark, you're number 4 executive. You're divisional president of the biotech division and corporate vice president of the company, because he's 75 years old and the president's 71. So he wanted to be grooming some younger people to succession planning, replace them. He said, I'm number 4. He said, the 7 top executives each get their own Falcon 50. I'm going to take you out to the hangar in Decatur and introduce you to 2 pilots. And I had a Falcon 50 given to me my first week working there. I thought, oh boy, if there's a heaven, this is it. I got a Falcon 50. I'm 32 years old. I got blonde hair blowing in the wind. Boy, did I think I was it. You know, I was Justin Bieber before Justin Bieber is probably the easiest way to say it. So there I am, got a corporate jet. The 3rd week, the 75-year-old CEO walked by my office, and he said, Mark, have you moved your family to Germany yet? And I said, well, it's been 3 weeks. Takes a little bit of time to move from Germany. I said, we're looking at homes. We're talking to realtors. And he said, Mark, why don't you buy my home? I said, well, tell me about your home. By the way, the CEO of ADM was 35 years CEO. He owned 5% of the shares of a $70 billion company. He was a billionaire. So he told me his home was 13,000 square feet, said it has an 8-car garage, 3 golf greens on the property, horse riding stables with an inside arena that's heated for your kids to ride in the wintertime. And I was hearing all this, and I said, well, I'm 7 years out of college. That's a little bit too much home for me. He said, that's nonsense. I'll give you a startup bonus today. It's my 3rd week working there. I'll give you a startup bonus today. I own the main bank in Decatur. He said, I'll make a phone call, get you a good interest rate. I tell you, we're a publicly traded company. I look back, we should have went to prison for that deal that happened, because I had just been given a startup bonus to buy his home. So looking back, for sure should have went to prison for that deal. It was probably the start of the fork of the road of going the wrong direction in my life. So now I'm a couple years there. They published in Fortune magazine by the time I'm 34 years old that I'm going to be the next COO and president. Front cover Fortune magazine. I took that and framed it in my office. Probably everybody else is wrapping fish in it. I had it framed in every room of the house. You know, and we had a lot of rooms too in that house. So what do you do with an 8-car garage when you're 32 years old and you're full of yourself? You fill it up. The bonuses I was getting each month because of ethanol and the size of our division was almost $300,000 a month for 8 years. And that's 1989, by the way. That'd be like $1 million a month. Like I said, I was hook, line, and sinker. So my wife's driving this 10-year-old Grand Cherokee, and I said, Ginger, I just bought a red Ferrari with last month's bonus. Let me buy you a yellow one. And Ginger said, no, I want to be a good steward for God. And I think I have another 5 years on my car. It's already 10 years old. She said, I think I have another 5 years on it. I mean, it was like hearing Latin. So I went out and bought a yellow one for myself since she didn't want one. So she drove the 10-year-old Jeep, and boy, I had that 8-car full of 8 cars and everything in the world. It's amazing, though. I look back all these years, 34 years ago, and I thought, boy, I wish I could have the peace and contentment that Ginger had. Because I'd buy a Ferrari, and 2 weeks later, I'm thinking, what's next? What's next? There was a void in my heart the size of Grand Canyon. Live in a mansion, had a corporate jet, had 8 cars, but it was not filling that void in my heart compared to Ginger had that void filled. So I did kind of have so much respect for where she was in her life, where she had so much peace and contentment. So now I'm a couple years there. They announced in Fortune magazine that I'm going to succeed the COO and president. Someone 10 years older than me was going to be the next CEO, but I thought, he's 10 years older than me. Someday I'll still be the CEO of ADM too, especially if you live in the house I lived in. It was the original house of John Daniels that founded Archer Daniels Midland 100 years earlier, and then the CEO I worked for lived there 35 years. Only one lived in that house was CEO of ADM. I thought, you have this house, you're going to be CEO someday of the 56th largest company in America. So the CEO, it's published that I was going to be the next COO when the COO retired. He then came back to my office and he said, Mark, you're 2 years with the company now. You're like family. I'm going to share with you some things we're doing in the company. And he started sharing with me for 12 years how they were meeting with competitors and fixing the prices of food additives that go into all your foods. They go into Kellogg's, Kraft, Pillsbury, orange juices, iced teas, fixing the prices of several different ingredients. And I said, well, that's not legal. And he said, Mark, it's not legal, but this is where the rationalization comes in, where you lie to yourself like Ron was sharing about. He said, Mark, it's not legal, but everybody does it. If you're in the commodity business, this is the way business is done. He said, Mark, you're less than 10 years out of school. He's been CEO by that point by 38 years. He said, this is the real world. And I tell you, he just announced where I was going to be the next COO and president, number 2 of the 56th largest company. I was going to do whatever it took. And I said, okay, I'll learn it. He said he wanted to mentor me. I had the personality to eventually to lead this international cartel. So he started training me and mentoring me to take over the largest international cartel in U.S. history. So 7 months into it, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm just watching as they meet with competitors all around the world in Hong Kong and in Switzerland and Japan, and I'm watching it take place, and I'm, in a couple years, he said, Mark, you're going to be running this cartel. And a few months later, 7 months as I'm learning, my wife says, Mark, there's something you're not telling me. I've known you since you're in the 8th grade. She was 7th grade and I was 8th grade. Something you're weighing on you, you're not telling me. I know you like a book, Mark. And I started telling her how I'm being mentored to take over this international cartel. First thing she asked, November 5th, 1992, she said, Mark, is that legal? I said, well, it's not legal, but everybody does it. If you're in the commodity business, this is what you got to do. And I used the same line that the CEO shared with me. I said, everybody does it, hon. They've been doing it for 12 years, and I'm only 7 months into it. And I said, Ginger, we are going from $3 million a year to $10 million a year once I learn this. She said, Mark, I don't care about $10 million a year. I'd rather have a 2,000 square feet house, 2 Fords in the driveway, and have my husband back. She said, I want my husband. She said, I don't even think you know the grades of our 3 children. I said, I know the grades of our children. I listed them off, and I got 1 right out of 3. And she said, Mark, you're an addict. I said, Ginger, I don't use drugs or alcohol at all. She said, Mark, you're an addict with your work. You are totally consumed with your work, and it's taken over your life. You don't even know the grades of our kids. And for that reason, I'm going to go pray about this. Keep in mind, she's a Christian already for 4 or 5 years by this point. She said she's going to go pray about it, and we talk about it later. Whenever Ginger told me she was going to pray about something, I knew I was in trouble. There was nothing that ever turned out good for me when she went back and prayed about it. So she went back, prayed a couple hours. She came out, and she said, Mark, God led me to a decision. I said, what decision? She said, you have to turn yourself into federal authorities today. I said, Ginger, I turned myself in federal authorities. I could go to prison for breaking antitrust laws. It's a federal offense. I said, our CEO's on the phone 2 or 3 times a month with President Clinton. He's best friends with President Clinton. I said, this is a $70 billion company. They will destroy us. She said, you know, I prayed about that, Mark, and God will protect us. If you go to prison, she said, I'll stay with you. And the company, God will protect us from the company. But we're going to do it, and we're going to do it today. And I said, Ginger, you could end up homeless. She said, you know what, Mark? I'd rather be homeless than live in a house where illegal activities occurring. And I tell you, I've known her since she was 13, and I know there's no way you could talk her out of it. And we argued, biggest argument we've ever had in our entire marriage. And she won. And we're meeting with the FBI a couple hours later. I don't know how many of you ever went and told the FBI you're stealing $1 billion a year, but I can tell you it's an interesting reaction, to tell you firsthand. I mean, it reached Janet Reno. It reached William Sessions, the director of the FBI, the Attorney General. It became the largest price-fixing case in U.S. history, started by my wife, Ginger, not by me. Because that's the difference between a whistleblower and an informant. A whistleblower is someone that's sitting in front of the FBI and someone that does the right thing and sacrifices everything. That was Ginger. But an informant is someone that's sitting in front of the FBI and you have a choice to either be arrested or work for the FBI. And that was me, because that's the choice they gave me. They said, Mark, we got to arrest you today. I can remember even meeting with the FBI. And the FBI said, now, what are we here talking about? I said, you got all these drug dealers in Decatur, Illinois. I don't feel safe here. I'm divisional president. And I just kept trying to get them going a different direction. And then he said, what are we here for? And I said, yeah, but you got all these drug dealers in Decatur, Illinois. I don't feel safe here in this town. I'm divisional president of one of the biggest companies in the world. And Ginger said, a fraud. He said, a fraud. How much was the fraud? And then I said again, you got all these drug dealers in Decatur. I used that line 6 times. It didn't work, by the way. And Ginger said, $1 billion fraud. He said, $1 million fraud. She said, no, $1 billion fraud. How long's that been going on? I said, yeah, but you got all these drug dealers. I saw them when I walked in the office building. I don't feel safe here. Ginger said it's been going on for 12 years. He got all the truth out of Ginger quickly. And so that's when I had a choice to either wear a wire or be arrested. And I sure didn't want to get arrested at 34 years of age in 1992. So I agreed to wear a wire. They told me it'd be about for 6 weeks, 10 hours a day for 6 weeks, that's all. So the FBI agents met me the next day, taped microphones to my chest, had a tape recorder attached to my back with an athletic band, had a second tape recorder in a briefcase and a third tape recorder in a notebook, just in case if one of the tape recorders stopped working. They wired me every morning, 6 o'clock every morning, Monday through Friday, for 3 years. It was not 6 weeks. Because what happened was, it started with one ingredient called lysine, $1 billion product that goes into Tyson and Purdue Farms and Tyson Incorporated, and it was one ingredient. But then someone would brag and say, we've been doing that with corn syrup, and we made $400 million on that last year. And someone else would say, we did it on citric acid, and we made $250 million last year. These guys kept bragging about their illegal activity and became 11 cases. So every time it was about ready to come to an end, a new case would start. So it went on for 3 years. And the FBI would say, Mark, if these guys catch you, they'll kill you. And I heard that a couple times a week for 3 years. I was falling apart. People at work thought I had cancer. They said, Mark, you need to see a doctor. Something's not right with you. And what it was, I was falling apart wearing a wire for the FBI. The most adverse years I had in my life was 3 years of wearing a wire for the FBI. There was this green lamp. This green lamp looked like it came from a yard sale. And this green lamp, it had the video camera in it because the FBI knew they were going up against one of the biggest companies in the world, and they wanted to show it to a jury, not just the audio tapes. They wanted to have video because this was a 7-week trial in Chicago. ADM paid $70 million in legal fees, had some of the best lawyers in the world, and they knew that was going to happen, so they wanted to show the jury videos. So I would tell the FBI where the meeting's going to occur, and they would make sure they got that green lamp. Looked like it came from a yard sale in that conference room. That green lamp was at the Shangri-La Hotel. They even had to use it to take it from 120 to 220 volts, and they had to meet with the embassy and Interpol to get that green lamp in that room. And that green lamp was with 11 guys, Shangri-La Hotel in Singapore, $1,000 night hotel. 2 weeks later, that same green lamp, 5 feet from us, was at the Mandarin Hotel in Hong Kong. Then it was in Maui at a Sheraton Hotel in Maui. Then it was the Irvine Marriott at Orange County Airport in California. Then it was at the Four Seasons Hotel a few weeks after that in Chicago. That green lamp was at 2 or 3 meetings a month, same 11 guys for 3 years. I thank God there was not a woman criminal among us. Because if we had a woman criminal among us, a woman would have said, that green lamp has followed us around the world. But I tell you what, you got 11 greedy guys. What I learned is greed blinds you. I saw it firsthand. That green lamp was brought into that jury trial in Chicago. All the co-defendants hit their head. 30 people went to prison in this case. 4 from ADM went, but 30 people total. There wasn't anybody that got off the hook in that case. And that green lamp was brought in, and they all remembered the green lamp. But it was a little bit too late by that point because they had 3 years of audio and video by that point. I can remember someone was knocking on the door at the Atlanta Hotel. There used to be, right at the Atlanta airport, a Sheraton in 1993 that's no longer there. In that Sheraton, someone from the hotel was knocking on the door, and we were having a price-fixing meeting in one of those conference rooms. The FBI was in the next room controlling that camera and zooming in whoever was talking because it was a remote control camera in that lamp. Someone knocked on the door, and one of the co-defendants said, "Oh my gosh, I bet it's the FBI." And someone else said, "Oh, yeah, let's put our hands out. We're going to get arrested." And all started laughing. Then someone else said, "The FBI is so stupid, there's no way they could catch something this sophisticated." That was played to a jury in front of those defendants. I tell you what, it didn't take much deliberation for that jury. Everyone was convicted and convicted quickly. So the FBI was so appreciative that I risked my life. They gave me a 6-month, a Martha Stewart sentence. No fence, no razor wire, white-collar camp, for 6 months, a plea agreement. Deal of a lifetime after everything that happened. So Ginger and I are in front of my lawyer in Chicago, Illinois, who's a judge now. He said, "Mark, 6 months. You got 48 hours to sign this. Everybody else is going to go to prison for years." I looked at Ginger. I said, "I don't know. I just wore a wire 3 years. I don't know if I can go to prison for 6 months." She said, "Mark, you go in at 38, because I'm 38 now. Keep in mind, I wore a wire for 3 years." She said, "You go in at 38, you come out at 38. Let's put it behind us." And I looked at Ginger. I said, "Ginger, it's all your fault. I've had to wear a wire for 3 years because of you, Ginger. And the fact you want me to sign this plea agreement, I'm going to do the opposite." And I ripped it up, threw it in a trash can, fired the lawyer who recommended it, hired a group of lawyers the next day, and I fought that case for 3 years in the courts to get 8.5 years instead. And I had a 6-month plea agreement right in front of me. I was my own worst enemy every step of the way. Ginger made a comment. She said, told our friend, she said, "You know what? Divorce is not an option, but murder is." And I tell you what, the fact my husband turned a 6 months sentence in a trash can, murder's on the table. I've never seen her so mad in my entire life as I did when I ripped up that plea agreement. I was so depressed, I wrote a 17-page letter to Ginger and my 3 kids, and I tried to kill myself. I pulled my car in a garage and tried to take my own life. I said, "I can't do 8.5 years in prison. It's a 10-year sentence. There's no parole in the federal system. You get 15% off good behavior. So a 10-year sentence is 8.5 years, and there's nothing less than that in a federal sentence." I said, "Who's going to hire me? Come out in my 40s. I won't have a family probably when I get out. I'm better off being dead, hopeless and helpless. Try to take my own life. I was hospitalized for a month after trying to take my own life. And after I was sent home, the judge gave me 7 months to get back on my feet before I had to go to prison. And I kept thinking, I'll find a way to take my own life before that. And someone read about that in the newspaper. His name was Ian Howe. Several people here know Ian. And Ian Howe was CFO of a pharmaceutical company, but Ian was also part of CBMC, Christian Businessmen Connection. And he showed up at my doorstep, and I didn't know him, and he said, Mark, prison is going to be the beginning of your life, and you're going to find your true purpose in life with the journey you're ready to start. I said, Ian, I'm going to prison for 8 months. For 8 years. It can't be the beginning of my life. He said, Mark, it will be the beginning of your life. You will find your purpose in your life. And I said, how do I do that, Ian? He said he had a study called Operation Timothy. He was going to introduce me to God and introduce me to Jesus. It was a Bible study. And he started discipling. I said, now, Ian, my parents are Christians. I grew up as a Christian, but I got 8 years of college. Tell me God does not exist. He said, Mark, just keep going through this study with me. Keep praying about it. Let's pray together, and let's see what God does. So he spent 7 months, spent 6-7 hours a week with me going through Operation Timothy. And he planted an important seed that started giving me some hope. Then my second week in prison, a man named Chuck Colson showed up. Chuck Colson was the White House counselor under President Nixon. And in the 1970s, Chuck Colson showed up to see me in 1998. But in 1970s, Chuck Colson went to prison for the Watergate scandal. The Attorney General did, the Director of the FBI did, all the 12 people that worked for President Nixon, main lieutenants under President Nixon, went to prison. But President Nixon got pardoned by President Ford, but the others did not get pardoned. Chuck Colson became a Christian in prison during that time, and it changed his life. So he showed up my second week, and he said, Mark, has anybody ever shared about God with you? And I said, I've been 7 months going with somebody named Ian Howe through a Bible study. He said, Mark, have you surrendered your life to Jesus? I said, I want to, Chuck, but I got 8 years of college that's telling me no, there is no God. Cornell University said if you believe in God, you cannot be a PhD scientist. He said, Mark, he went to Brown, in another Ivy League school. And he was told there is no God also at Brown. He said, Mark, they were wrong. He said, I learned it, they're wrong. And he said, Mark, do you think a PhD scientist believes in God? And I said, no, I don't believe there's one exists in the world. Not one exists. And he showed me an article that day by Albert Einstein, said only God could create the universe and only God could create man. And then he gave me a book by Sir Isaac Newton, where Sir Isaac Newton wrote as much about Jesus as he did about science. I said, boy, they never taught me any of that at Cornell. And then he showed me Francis Collins, who discovered the human genome, was a Christian. Said they sure never shared that with me at Cornell. And it was book after book, article after article. 3 months into this, being discipled by Chuck Colson, some of the best scientists believing in God, he said, Mark, I'm going to share with you an atheist from Minnesota who's still alive today. His name is Dr. Don Byerly, a PhD biologist that wanted to prove once and for all that God did not exist. And he studied it for 10 years, and he said, here's his result. And he gave me the book. And the book was titled Surprised by Faith. This atheist, Dr. Don Byerly, studied for 10 years, and he concluded God exists and Jesus is the Son of God. And I remember on June 4th, 1998, 3 months in federal prison, I surrendered my life to God and to Jesus for the first time in my life. For the first time in my life, I remember being in tears, and I remember saying, how can a scientist not believe in God with all the evidence that I've just seen? And I became a Christian it was a month after I turned 41, and it changed my life. Then I thought, okay, I'm a Christian. I can go home now, right? I had 8 years of prison left. You just don't go home. But I thought, well, what's my purpose in life here in federal prison for 8 more years to get out at age 48? I just turned 41 on that June 4th, 1998, a month before that. So I started praying about that. And I started helping guys get their GEDs. I started helping Spanish guys learn how to read better English and write better English. I helped some of the ones that finished their GED get a 2-year degree through correspondence. It become the most productive years of my life. I had $3 million a year for 8 years. Now I'm $20 a month for 8 years. They became the most productive years of my life in federal prison in my 40s. I basically became a free man in prison. And the prison was that life of greed addiction that I had to the way the world defines success, the house, the cars, the planes, the titles. That was prison. But finally that void was filled, and it was $20 a month. And that void was filled. Some of the most productive years of my life. So I learned heating and air conditioning. I thought, well, who's going to hire a PhD biochemist after 8 years of prison? So I learned heating and air conditioning. I learned it well. The warden used to come and get me in prison, say, hey, Mark, it's 2 a.m. We got to get it fixed. Got to get it fixed. I said, well, get me there. I'll get it fixed. So I became pretty good at it after 8 years. So I thought that's how I was going to make a living for my family. Some biotech companies started reading about me because it was a high-profile case in the newspaper. And 4 different companies visited me in federal prison, and they'd have me review their patents. Sometimes it was 30, 40 hours a week. I barely had time to go to prison. I'm reviewing these patents. And I thought, and I was reviewing all these patents, and those 4 companies offered me a job the day I got out. And I joined one with a Christian CEO that had purpose-driven, that was thinking long-term. I didn't want to fall back in that trap of greed. So I joined a company that was very long-term thinking, and faith-based company, a biotech company, cancer research company. I started off the level at age 48, someone right out of college, and 4 promotions, I became the COO and president of that company, the number 2 for 10 years. But this time doing it God's way, not my way. Doing it God's way, not my way. And I'm still on the advisory board of that company still today. We look back, and Ginger looks back, and she says, as much as she said murder was on the table, when I took that 6-month plea agreement and threw it away, she says today, thank God I did not sign that 6-month plea agreement, because I would have never listened to Ian Howes or Chuck Colson with a 6-month sentence. But when you got 8.5 years ahead of you, you're broken. You're at the end of yourself. To the point I attempted suicide even before I went to prison. And she said, thank God I got it. She was on an interview with CBS News in 2009 when the movie came out. And she was there in the interview, and they were asking her, and they said, Ginger, how'd you do this? How would a wife stay with all this? She said, I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. My flesh was telling me to run, but God told me to stay. And that's when they asked her, he said, well, were there ever some tough times? She said, oh, yeah. She said, right on national TV. She said, divorce wasn't an option, but murder was, right on national TV. And they said, when were you the most mad? And she brought up the 6-month sentence. And then she said, I thank God Mark did not sign that 6 months, because God gave him exactly what he needed, which was 9 years in federal prison. I would have loved to have been in that interview, because I would have said 2 years would have been enough. But I do agree that 6 months would not have been enough. I would not have been to the end of myself with a 6-month sentence. That's almost enabling. I would have, like Ginger said, I would have came out the same greedy man. I went in with 6 months. I got to know my kids well in federal prison. Shame on me that it took me going to federal prison to get to know my kids. Ginger came every Friday night, all day Saturday, and all day Sunday for 8.5 years. She moved to 3 states to live next to 3 different prisons to visit me. It's a miracle that our marriage survived. Not many marriages. There's not many wives visiting their husbands in federal prison. So I don't take it lightly that she stayed with me. And we're 44 years married, and about a month away from being 45 years married, which is a miracle as far as I'm concerned. She did tell me this morning that murder was still an option, even though divorce wasn't. But no, it's in our kids. And our youngest was 6 years old when I was wearing a wire. He's 38 now, and he took it the hardest compared to the other 2. And I tell you, our kids are walking with the Lord, and they're such a good track. And I give Ginger credit to how she raised our kids. I say Ginger did alone, and she had amazing impact, to the point where I hear our children often saying the only marriage they can imagine having is the marriage of their parents. And that wasn't me. I gave Ginger every reason to run. They're talking about Ginger. The only marriage they could ever imagine having is the marriage of their parents. The companies. So I spent $4 million on legal fees, had 11 lawyers, had to sell the house and cars. ADM paid the legal fees of all the other leaders, but they weren't me. I was testifying against them. So they wouldn't exercise my stock options. They wouldn't pay my legal fees. But the companies that were the victims, including Coca-Cola in Atlanta and Tyson Foods and Purdue Farms, all these companies won $3 billion back. In the corn syrup alone to Coca-Cola in Atlanta was $400 million. That was the largest fine paid. And I tell you, they all gave credit to Ginger. The Tyson Foods general counsel was a Christian. He got the others on the phone line and said, you guys, this has been going on for 12 years. If it wasn't for Ginger Whitacre, it'd still be going on today. And look at what she's going through with her husband, 8.5 years in prison. They gave Ginger a whistleblower reward and financed my family for 8.5 years. The victims of the case, the ones who I stole from in the price-fixing scheme, took care of my family for 8.5 years. Put my kids through college, paid all their expenses. God was at work. Only God could do that. Touch the hearts of them to do that. I thank God today for brokenness. I thank God that I went to federal prison. I thank God that I attempted suicide and got the end of myself. Because without any of that, I'm not so sure I would know God today. And it's changed my life the last 26 years. So I joined that biotech company, and we included God. Sure, we did a lot of patent work and a lot of clinical trial work, and I was running the clinical trials, but there was a lot of God, and still is in that company too. And then I joined CBMC, the very group that Ian Howes worked for, and I became national director for 4 years and COO of that group for 4 years. And almost the last 5.5, almost 6 years, I've been with Coca-Cola Consolidated. Coca-Cola Consolidated is the largest bottler in America, 104 plant sites, and we have a chaplain in every plant. And it's in prayer groups, dozens of prayer groups and Bible studies and discipleship program. The purpose statement, hear this, publicly traded on the NASDAQ of a publicly traded company, kind of like Amber was talking about Lippert. Our purpose statement is to honor God in all we do by serving others, pursuing excellence, and growing profitably. Hear that. To honor God in all we do by serving others, pursuing excellence, and growing profitably, a publicly traded company. And how we live that out is through chaplaincy and prayer groups and Bible studies. And I mean, what a great environment. It's as much as a ministry as it is a corporation. This is a pretty exciting fact. Our chaplains, who do a wonderful job for us, we use Corporate Chaplains of America, and they do a great job for us, and the impact is tremendous. Corporate Chaplains of America, we measure each year. In 2023, it was 1,361 growth commitments, which are recommits and salvations. Recommits and salvations, 1,361 in 1 year. That's 113 recommits and salvations per month of our employees. So we're pretty excited. We're pretty excited about that. I stand here today as a PhD scientist from an Ivy League university, and I tell you, God does exist, and Jesus is the Son of God, and I have zero doubt about that in my mind. And what we do, what we call T-Factor, and that got mentioned here a little bit earlier too, which is transformation factor, is where we, for 23 years, Frank Harrison, our chairman and CEO, has become a purpose-driven, faith-friendly company for 23 years, and we share how we do that in events called T-Factor, and we share it with the world. We had 6,500 leaders go through T-Factor since COVID, 6,500. 3,100 just last year alone. And that represented 29 million employees represented of that 6,500, and from 72 different countries. So we're doing a T-Factor event, and I hope the ones that can join us from 1 o'clock today to 4 p.m. We're going to break that down. Some of our senior leaders come over, and we do it together in a 3-hour event called T-Factor, and we're going to share how we became a purpose-driven, faith-friendly company and the impact that has on our retention rates. And I mean, God has so blessed our business and so blessed our results. Only way I can explain our results with some record years, the last few years, is God blessed our business because we focus on God. God has so blessed our business. So hope that we're going to be in the Hall of Honor at the NASCAR Hall of Fame. You're welcome to join. Anybody, they bring a card. Wanted to kind of share this with you. Bring a card with them. And if you don't have a card, it has a little template you can fill out, which is the size of a card. And everyone will get a gift box with a hardback book about Transformation Factor from our CEO and chairman. We'll get some Coke products, leather journal, but will be a gift box. Will be FedEx to them. Anybody that drops off a card. So we hope you join us. Love to share with you in more detail about how we integrate faith at Coca-Cola Consolidated. Thank you for having me here today, and God bless all of you. Thank you.